Rapture becomes her. Chapter 13. Several minutes had passed, and as Emily did not return, after looking at his gold pocket watch for the fourth time, not hiding his exasperation, Barnaby asked Cornelia, "What's taking her so long?" Hiding her unease, Cornelia said, "She's probably just giving the servants a few last-minute instructions." Barnaby looked at her incredulously. "Do you take me for a dunce?" Cornelia grimaced, and he demanded, "Who is this friend that it was so important that she meet with right now?" Cornelia considered the question, unconcerned how much to reveal. Concluding that he could find out the identity of Emily's friend easily enough, she answered, "Most likely it is Jeb Brown." "And what business would she have with a fisherman?" Barnaby inquired, his eyes narrowed and fixed on Cornelia's face. "And don't try to fob me off by telling me she's buying fresh fish for tonight's dinner." Cornelia hesitated. Shortly she had Emily safely settled at Windmere, and though aware that if things worked out as she hoped, Barnaby would have to know the truth eventually, she was still reluctant to expose Emily's smuggling. She eyed the dark, hard-faced man before her, wondering how he would react if she told him the truth. Cornelia trusted him, else she would never have agreed to move to Windmere. She suspected that his interest in Emily was more than just kindness, and she'd been pleased with Emily's reaction to him, but that didn't mean she was ready to reveal all. It was too dicey, she finally decided, unwilling to risk a retraction of his invitation. She didn't think he would abandon them. In fact, she rather thought he'd take it in stride and never falter a step. But she wasn't willing to take any chances. When Cornelia remained silent, Barnabas sighed. Sitting down beside her, he took her frail hand in his and said gently, "Suppose I tell you what I think is going on?" "Suppose you do just that," she said, her intelligent hazel eyes intent on his. "I believe that Emily has gone to meet Jed because they are planning another run to a port in France to buy contraband goods for sale here in England," Barnabas said carefully, noting that she had not heard his words back in his face. He continued, "It's possible that Emily routinely goes about the countryside disguised as a boy and visits the Crown at odd hours of the night, as happened the night I first saw her, but I doubt it. I may be a newcomer to England, but even I've heard of the rampant smuggling that goes on along this stretch of coast. If she was involved in the landing of contraband goods, it explains why a gently born young woman was out at that hour of night, garbed as a boy and at the Crown, the center of the smuggling ring. Quite a leap based on one event." Barnaby grinned. "All right, I'll grant you that. But explain to me, Jeb's present in the channel that night, in the midst of a storm, a time and condition I've learned is often chosen by smugglers to make a landing. No fisherman I've ever met would take that sort of risk, and any fisherman worth his salt would have known the weather was turning ugly and would have made for port long before the storm hit." Cornelia shrugged. "You may be right, but that doesn't mean he's a smuggler." "No, but I'd like you to give me a good reason why he wasn't smuggling in that port that night, along with the revenues." "How should I know? I'm not a fisherman." "That's true," Barnaby conceded. "It's also true that Mrs. Gilbert was particularly reticent when I broached the subject with her that night. It was also clear she was hiding something they all wore. They could be involved in some other activity," he said slowly. "But my money is on smuggling." He studied her vigid features. "I am not your enemy, Cornelia," he muttered. "I'm on your side, but I cannot help you if I do not know what is going on." "Just suppose you're right. Why would you want to help us?" she demanded. "I think you already know the answer," Barnabas said softly. At the gleam of satisfaction that leaped into her hazel eyes, he smiled and added, "Yes, I mean to marry her, even if she is a queen of the Essex smugglers." He scratched the side of his face and admitted wryly, "I admit that I prefer as my future Viscountess that we end her smuggling days soon and decently bury that part of her past." "She didn't want to do it," Cornelia confessed. "But Geoffrey, Jeffrey decimated the estate by his gambling and poor management, and she felt she had no choice. She smiled sadly. I didn't like my husband's nephew very much, but Emily's father was a damn sight better than that Restro Jeffrey. Emily's father looked out for his people in the village, she scowled. When farms failed because of Jeffrey's practices, many farmers and their families were forced to abandon their livelihood, which hurt the village. As money grew scarcer, Jeffrey dismissed our servants with a pittance after they had served us well, nearly all of their lives. Her eyes pleading for understanding, she said quietly. Emily couldn't bear it. She had to do something. Lifting up the hand he still held, Barnaby pressed a kiss onto the wrinkled surface, smiling at her. He said, I would have expected nothing less of her. Cornelia's fingers tightened around his. And do you mean to marry her? She asked urgently. Try and stop me, he said, a crooked grin curving his lips. Infused with new energy, Cornelia took his hand from his and sitting up straighter, she looked around. What is taking that drafted child so long? She demanded crossly. The coach will be arriving any minute. She waved a hand at Barnaby. You best go find out what is keeping her. Glad to have something to do, Barnaby hastened from the room, entering the kitchen and seeing no sign of Emily or Jeb there. A knife blade of her forebrother slashed through him. Astonished by his unexpected appearance in the middle of her kitchen, Mrs. Spaulding looked up from the pot she was standing and exclaimed, You're Jocelyn, what brings you here? Walker, who had been sitting at the table drinking a cup of tea, surged to his feet. My lord, he cried, is something wrong? Where is she? Barnaby asked, his gaze hard on Walker's face. And don't lie to me. Walker swallowed. I believe that she has walked to the stables. Alone? Barnaby asked in a whiplash tone. No, her friend is with her. Which way to the stables? Barnaby snapped. Follow me, Walker said nervously. They stepped outside, and Walker pointed in the direction of the stables. It's not more than an eighth of a mile past that bend. Barnaby shot away from the house, his long stride eating up the distance. He had not gone more than a few yards when the sound of an approaching carriage spun him around. His coach had arrived. At least that's one problem out of the way, he thought as he took off in the direction of the stables. He was nearing the second curve when he spied an object lying at the side of the road that he recognized immediately. The image of Emily grabbing a blue and cream curticle before she left the room to meet with her visitor sprang to his mind. Ice in his veins, he broke into a run, skilled into a stop before the feminine bit of silk and velvet. With trembling fingers, he picked up the reticule. It was Emily's, and he could think of no good reason why it had been discarded here. An excellent tracker, he scanned the road's surface, spotting the recent prints of two horses. From the tracks, it was obvious that the horsemen had come from the woods, and that there had been a scuffle, but the many hoof prints made it difficult to tell. The tracks vanished into the woodland on the opposite side of the road. Unable to form a clear picture in his mind of what had happened, but fearing a bloody ill for Emily, with her reticule clenching his hand, he ran to the stables. He prayed that she was there with Jeb, and with a logical explanation why her reticule had been left on the side of the road, but in his heart he knew he would not find her. Rushing past the two horses he recognized as his own tied outside, Barnaby burst into the stables and seeing no sign of Emily or Jeb, the only occupant, a tow-headed dapper boy of not more than 12, sweeping the main alleyway, he inquired sharply, Where is she? When the boy gaped at him, he added, Where is Miss Emily and Jeb Brown? Confronted by a large stranger looking like black murder, the stable boy gulped and held his ground. And who might you be, asking for Miss Emily? He asked before his courage deserted him. I am Lord Jocelyn, Barnaby half-growled. The boy blinched and stammered. Lord Jocelyn, forgive me, my lord. I didn't realize. Barnaby waved away his apologies. Pay it no heed. I'm in the kind of voice, he said. Has Jeb Brown been here? The boy nodded. He was there about 20 minutes ago, got on his horse and said he was leaving for the village. Barnaby's heart contracted. And Miss Emily, did you see her? No, my lord, only Jeb. Barnaby spun on his heel and headed out of the stable, calling over his shoulder. I'll be taking the horses. After mounting his horse with Lamb's horse trailing behind him, Barnaby galloped to the house. Lamb and Walker met him in front of the house and tossed in the reins of Lamb's horse to him. He said, "Emily's missing. We have to find her." Walker gasped, his face full of horror. "But she was of Jeb," he exclaimed. Barnaby cast him a cold glance that showed him the blue and cream reticule he stuck inside his jacket when he mounted his horse. "I found this on the road. There is no sign of Emily, and the stable boy said that Jeb left 20 minutes or so ago." "Those devils!" Walker burst out, incensed and clearly frightened. "They've taken her. If those devils are Geoffrey and Answorth, I agree. But unless we know their destination, the information does us little good. We do not know where they've taken her," Barnaby snapped, struggling to control the helpless rage coursing through him. Walker's eyes lit up. "The Godate place," he said eagerly, babbling. He added, "Jeb just told us that Squire and Answorth had lied about going to New Haven. Young Sam had seen both of them early this afternoon at the old Godate farmstead. That must be where they've taken her." Barnaby cursed his unfamiliarity with the area and bit out, "Where the hell is the Godate place?" The directions spilled out of Walker's mouth faster than water bursting from a dam. With their destination clear, Barnaby and Lamb wheeled their horses around and disappeared down a driveway. As he galloped away from the birches, Barnaby didn't allow his mind to stray to what might be happening to Emily. That way lay madness. His one thought was simply to reach her before. Cursing and praying as he never had in his life, he concentrated grimly on the road before him. Like a beacon, the knowledge that Emily was in danger somewhere ahead drew him onward. Dusk had fallen, but they found the turnout to the Godate place without effort, and with hardly a check in their breakneck pace. Their horses careened off the road and thundered down a twisting, overgrown track. A half-mile in, there was a brisk flicker of light as they followed the winding road, but it disappeared as they rounded another curve. Though it went against the grain, knowing they were coming up on the house, they slowed their horses, not wanting to alert the culprits of their arrival. Arriving at the front of the shabby one-story farmhouse, they jerked their horses to a halt and swung out of the saddle almost in the same motion. In the deepening dusk, Barnaby studied the dark shape of the place, listening intently, searching for a sign of the faint light he glimpsed on the way in. From the front of the building looked empty and deserted, but glancing down the east side of the house, Barnaby spied the flickering light. It was coming from a room situated just about in the middle of the house. His heart beat thickly. Instinctively, he knew Emily was in that room. Returning to the front of the house, he whispered to Lamb, "I'll take the front, you the back." Lamb nodded and disappeared like a shadow into the encroaching darkness. Slipping his knife from his boot, Barnaby approached the house. The stout wooden door opened stiffly, and knife in hand. He stepped inside the house, taking a moment for his eyes to adjust to the interior gloom. A musty smell met his nose, and from the faint light that remained outside, Barnaby saw that the room he entered was empty. He crossed the room, easing toward a shadowy area ahead of him. As he had guessed, the shadows gave way to a narrow hall that he suspected led to the kitchen. But it was a glimmer of light that came from beneath a door on the left side of the hall that was the focus of his attention. Emily woke disoriented with her jaw aching. Groggy, she reached for her drawer but was unable to move her hand. It took her a moment to understand why she could not. She was bound, eagle spread, her hands fastened to either side of the bedpost, her ankles strapped to opposite posts at the bottom. Snapping fully awake, she made the alarming discovery that her gown and chestmides had been slit down the middle and lay in tatters on either side of her body, leaving her bosom and thighs naked. Panic shot through her, and she bucked and twisted against her bonds, the memory of Answorth's abduction rushing back. What a fool she had been. She raged not to pay more attention to Cornelia's warnings. But why me, she wondered. It was Anne Answorth had wanted, and if he hadn't gone to New Haven all day, there was no way he could have learned that Anne had escaped his grasp. Fighting back the horrified hysteria that rose in her throat, Emily struggled to make sense of her situation. Concentrating on something else helped calm her and allowed her to ignore her own desperate straits and what might be her fate. It was apparent, she admitted bitterly, that Anne's wife and that weasel Geoffrey had learned somehow of Anne's departure from the Birches. How? When? But none of that mattered right now, Emily told herself, battering back another wave of panic. What mattered was her escape, and the light from a lone candle sitting on a short, battered chest of drawers against the wall. She studied her surroundings. Beyond the light, the chest of drawers, a chair next to the chest, heaped with a pile of men's clothing, and a pair of gleaming boots on the floor beside the chair. There were no other furnishings, nothing that gave her any sense of where she was being held. The room was small, under the overpowering scent of cinnamon and cloves that permeated the air. She caught the faint, musty odor associated with deserted, unused houses. From her position on the bed, she could see that the ceiling and walls were roughly hewn, utilitarian, and economical, with no sign of style or elegance. Turning her head, she studied the bedpost to which she was tied, made of good, solid English oak. They were square and without adornment. Excuse me. Like the chest and chair, practical and simple, they served a purpose, but no craftsman had ever touched them. This was no gentleman's house, and turning over responsibilities, she decided that most likely she was an abandoned farmhouse. But where? And how would anybody find her before it was too late? Before Anne's wave came, and the panic she had held at bay ripped free, and even knowing it was helpless like a vixen with her foot in a steel trap, Emily fought the bonds that held her so securely. It was a silent, desperate fight, but fertile, and after several minutes, her wrists and ankles torn and bleeding from her struggles, she collapsed exhausted against the mattress. The room was cool, and she shivered, unbearably aware of her nakedness. For just a moment she let despair take her and tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. How arrogant she had been, and oh, so damned confident. She had nothing to fear from Answorth. Reflecting on her shortcomings, accomplished nothing, and determined that Answorth would not find her cowering and broken, twisting her head, brushed aside the signs of tears. Her mouth set. She didn't see a way to escape the fate that awaited her, but she wasn't going to give Answorth the satisfaction of hearing her plead or beg. The door opened, and she stiffened. Through slitted eyes, she watched Answorth amble into the room. In one hand he held the candle, in the other a snifter, and a crystal decanter of amber-colored liquid she suspected was brandy, probably some she had smuggled in from France. Answorth wore a dark blue silk robe with a gold thread running through it, and her mouth went dry when she realized that it was his clothes on the chair, and that he was naked beneath the robe. Setting the candle, snifter, and decanter down on the chest of drawers, Answorth walked back to the door, and Emily heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. He returned to the chest of drawers, and after pouring some brandy from the decanter into the snifter, he finally rotated in her direction and looked at her, his eyes traveling over her body. Her flesh shivered under that vague gaze, but she forced herself to give no sign of the reversion boiling through her. Your charms are far more bountiful than I would ever have expected, Charnsworth said, crossing the stand beside the bed. He reached down and cupped one breast. Now who would have ever thought that you had these charming little apples hidden away? Vowing not to give him the enjoyment of watching her struggle, she did not try to escape his touch. It would have been useless anyway. Ignoring the gorge rising in her throat while he fondled her breast, beyond the loathing glittering in her eyes, she betrayed nothing. While he trailed a hand down her thigh, it took all the willpower she possessed not to give him the satisfaction of flinching and trying to jerk away. His fingers were turning to her breast, Answorth smiled. "Oh, lay there like a log if you wish. It matters not to me," he said. Something ugly moved in the gray eyes. "Because, you see, my lovely, I can make you move if I want to." His fingers dug into her breast, and in one swift movement, he bent down and bit her nipple. Pain and shock roared through her, and she arched upward, screaming. Outside in the hall, Emily's scream cut through bond like a rapier. Fury and fear spurring him, he sprang forward, tried the doorknob and found the lock under used his shoulder as a battering ram. He hit the door and propelled by his powerful assault. The wood splintered and the door burst open, banging explosively against the interior wall. Barnaby charged into the room, the knife bleeding in his hand. It took him only a second to take in the scene. Emily's eagle-spread body in the bed, Answorth in a darkly robed standing beside her. At the sound of Barnaby's shoulder against the door, Answorth's head straightened, but his fingers were still on Emily's breast, and he stared at Barnaby in open-mouthed astonishment. His gaze dropped to the knife, and his hand slipped away. After that first frantic glance at Emily, Barnaby halted a few feet from the bottom of the bed and kept his attention solely on Answorth. Grim-faced, the two men regarded each other across the small room, violence swelling in the air between them. Despite the desperate situation, Answorth thought of a ploy that might save his life and allow him to snatch victory from defeat. Jocelyn was making no attempt to attack him, and gambling, he could still turn this around in his favor and drive away the other man. Blazingly, Answorth drawled, "I'm afraid you're too late," he smiled. "The deed is done. She is mine." "He lies!" shouted Emily, straining against the bonds that held her. Fury at Answorth replacing the sweet relief that had coursed through her when Jocelyn had crashed into the room. Fixated on each other, neither man paid her any heed, and desperately she cried, "He lies, I tell you! He is a lying serpent!" His cold eyes watchful, Answorth said, "Well, of course you would say that." Barnaby only stared at him, with a predator's unblinking stare, and Answorth added, "I'm sure she preferred a Viscount to a mere Mister. And your fortune to mine, but you have to settle for being plain. Mrs. Answorth would be happy with what I can provide." "I think not," said Barnaby softly. "When she leaves here tonight with me, it will be as my affianced bride." Answorth nearly choked in the fury that spiraled up to him. To have come this close and fail, it was intolerable. His gaze strayed a second to his clothes on a chair just a few feet away. He carried a small pistol cunningly concealed in his jacket pocket, and if he could reach it, silent near the chair, he said indifferently, "The choice is yours if you want another man's leavings." "I don't believe you, and even if I did, it would make no difference," Barnaby said coolly. "I mean to marry her." Emily gaped at Barnaby. Jocelyn wanted to marry her? Absurd. His outrageous statement had to be a ploy to throw Answorth off guard. Jocelyn couldn't want to marry her. Or could he? Heart thudding, her thoughts whirling. She could not tear her eyes away from that fierce, dark face. "I heard that Americans had some old habits, but I didn't realize that it included wedding damaged goods." Answorth sneered, moving imperceptibly nearer his clothes and a pistol. Barnaby shrugged, not betraying by so much as a flicker of an eyelash the rage that coiled inside of him. His gaze fixed on Answorth, he waited with a skillful hunter's patience for the other man's next move. Emily was bewildered by Jocelyn's imperviousness to Answorth's taunts. Why didn't he do something? Answorth was unarmed, and Jocelyn had the knife. Why didn't he use it? She studied him, noting for the first time the vigilant yet apparently relaxed stance. He appeared in no hurry to strike, but there was no doubt in her mind that he had every intention of killing Answorth. Why the delay? Slowly it dawned on her that he was holding back for a reason, that he was enduring Answorth's taunts and deliberately allowing Answorth time. But time for what? Why didn't he kill the bastard? Like Emily, Answorth wondered why Barnaby had not gutted him in an instant. If positions were reversed, he would have enjoyed it. An Englishman, he thought contemptuously, wouldn't have hesitated, or endured the insults he had thrown at him. Convinced Jocelyn was no danger to him, Answorth edged toward the chair. His leg brushed the edge of the chair, and satisfaction flooded him. The pistol was inches away. Disdainfully, Answorth presented his bat to Barnaby and reaching casually for his jacket. He said, "Since nothing I say appears able to dissuade you from this foolish course, I shall leave the pair of you to your fate." His fingers found the pistol, and with the weapon firmly in hand, he whirled around, expecting Jocelyn to still be standing by the bottom of the bed. But Jocelyn was no longer there. The instant Answorth turned his back, moving with the speed and grace of a hunting cat, Barnaby closed the distance between them, and he was ready. When Ainsworth swung around the pistol in his hand, only when Ainsworth faced him did he strike. With one careless blow, Barnaby knocked the pistol from Ainsworth's grasp and drove the knife deep into Ainsworth's chest. With disbelief, Ainsworth stared down at the knife protruding from his chest. His eyes wide and astonished, he sank to the floor, gasped, and died. Barnaby's face expressionless, he reached down and pulled the knife free, wiping the blade clean on Ainsworth's jacket. He turned around and, stepping next to the bed, cut Emily free with swift, sure strokes. Emily had never considered herself a watering pot, but the moment she was free, she sprang up and, kneeling on the bed, flung her arms around Barnaby's neck and burst into tears. One hand gently caressing the back of her head, the other wrapped possessively around her slender body. He held her near. "Shush now," he murmured. "Shh. I have you safe, and you need never fear that craving again." Once the first storm of weeping had passed, she lifted a tear-stained face to his and asked, "How did you find me?" "I found you very here and at a most opportune time," he said. Walker related to me the information Jeb had learned from Sam. He brushed a damp curl back from her cheek. "Do you know, I think we should have to do something rather magnificent for young Sam. He is the hero of the piece." Emily didn't deny the importance of Sam's part in her rescue, but in her heart, this big, tough American would always be her hero. At that moment she had needed him most, like an avenging god. He burst into the room and saved her from a horrid fate. Burrowed next to him, his arm firmly around her waist. He felt so warm, so large and solid, that she never wanted to leave the protection of that strong embrace. She sighed with pleasure and snuggled closer, the wool of his jacket scratching her bare breast and belly. Suddenly aware that she was as good as naked and that she was clinging to him, like a silly damsel in a Gothic novel, Emily froze. His arms dropped from around his neck, and concentrating on her task, she dragged the remnants of her gown across the front of her body. Keeping her head down, she muttered, "I owe you more than I can say." Remembering his stunning announcement that he intended to marry her, hoping to set his mind at ease, he added hurriedly, "And of course I understand that you weren't serious about marrying me. I know you said that just to distract Ansel." She risked a glance at him and smiled nervously. "I will not hold you to it," she assured him. Barnaby considered her tear-stained features for a long minute. The silvery fair hair hung in wild tangles about her pale skin. The thickly lashed gray eyes were dark with emotion, and there was the slightest quiver to that tempting rosy mouth. She had never looked lovelier to him, even with an unsightly bruise forming along her jaw, and if he had any reservations about the state of his art, they were settled. He cursed a moment, aware that he could hardly declare himself. She had just endured a violent abduction. A near rape, and a dead man lay on the floor, just a few feet behind him. Sighing, he said, "Thank you. That is very kind of you." Emily didn't know whether she was relieved or devastated by his acknowledgment that he had not been serious when he had told Ansfred he meant to marry her. Excuse me. Reminding herself that she didn't care, not really, she looked away and said, "I am in debt to you. If you had not arrived when you did." "But I did," Barnaby said with an effort, letting his arm drop from her waist, "and you owed me nothing." Keeping her face averted, she pulled what remained of her gown tighter around her. "I do owe you," she insisted. "If not for you, he would have raped me." Her gaze lifted. "Thank you. You saved not only my honor, but perhaps my life." "I think we're even," Barnaby said quietly. "Your Jeb saved me, and I have done nothing more than return the favor." Emily started to argue the point, but decided it would be a poor way of showing her thankfulness. She forced a smile. "If you say so, but you will always have my deepest and most heartfelt gratitude." Almost as if he had not heard her, his fingers gently skimmed the purple bruise he noticed earlier, and he asked, "Did he do that?" He nodded. The black eyes hardened. "Then it's a good thing I killed him, isn't it?" "I'm sure it's wicked of me," Emily admitted, "but I cannot help be glad that he is dead. He was a terrible man." Thinking back over those tense moments before he had killed Answer, she frowned. "Why did you wait? Why didn't you attack him the instant you entered the room?" When he made no reply, she didn't think he would answer her, and he seemed far more interested in wrapping her in the sheet he ripped from the bed. One shoe swaddled in a concealing sheet, as if she was a featherweight, he swung her up into his arms. turning on his heel with her cradle securely against him. He walked toward the door, and then it was then that he answered her. Answorth spouted a great deal of nonsense, but he was right about Americans having some old habits, he said evenly. And one of those old habits is a strong aversion to killing an unarmed man. I had to wait until he went for a weapon. But how did you know he had a weapon? She asked, astonished. Barnaby smiled and dropped the briefest kiss on her nose. He was a snake, my love, and all snakes have fans. I just had to wait for him to show them.